Well, hey, everybody, it's a Jimmy Dore show. I'm Aaron Maté, sitting in for Jimmy here with Americans comedian Kurt Metzger. And, you know, I think everybody, Jimmy Dore is going to be remembered for many things in history. He's going to go down as a great comedian, as somebody who told the truth and enlightened so many people about the injustices of this world on his wildly popular YouTube show. I also think he will be remembered as having one of the most ill-timed vacations of all time. Because imagine something happens out there that proves you 100% right on something you took a lot of heat for, but you're not around to enjoy because you're on vacation. That's what Jimmy is in right now. A month of
rest from just a day of I told you so.
Exactly.
Yeah. I thought you were describing like he passed on. He will be remembered.
I'm saying I can't think of a worse time for Jimmy to take a vacation than when in Congress, a group of rebel GOP lawmakers prove him right on the strategy of force the vote. And if you remember 2 years ago, Jimmy and other progressive voices were advocating that progressive lawmakers in Congress use their leverage, their vote for Nancy Pelosi, which Pelosi needed to become House Speaker, use that leverage to obtain concessions on progressive demands, such as Medicare for all and other issues. And these progressive lawmakers, including the squad, refused to do it. And there are all sorts of disingenuous arguments made to try to explain away why they don't want to do it. Well, fast forward 2 years later, House Republicans have adopted the exact same strategy, and they won a series of demands. So this is not just a moment of turmoil for Republicans. This is also a hugely humiliating moment for congressional progressives and all of their defenders who are attacking people like Jimmy Dore for urging them to pursue the strategy, which has just proved very successful.
It's also an embarrassing moment for women in positions of power.
Yeah, how so?
All dudes just made that thing happen at the squad. The squad of gal bosses couldn't get it together.
There were a couple of girl bosses in these House Rebels. Lauren Boebert was among them, I think. But yeah.
But it was mostly dudes. This is not the Jimmy Dore show views, but I would like. I've been taking an Andrew Tate course, and I feel like.
So, and this is so humiliating for progressives that everybody has recognized it. So here is a panel on Fox News talking about what this episode in the House means for congressional progressives.
All right, Guy, I want to go to you on this. You know, it's true, though, it wouldn't have happened under Nancy Pelosi. You have to admit that.
Yeah, I mean, because the Democrats, I think, got their act together and realized with such a slim majority, remember, they had the exact same size majority, just in reverse for 2 years. Mm-hmm. The Republicans actually created some chaos with motions to recommit and won a few of those votes. And Pelosi lowered the boom early in, I guess, the start of the new Congress, 2019. And she said, or I guess it would have been 2020, whatever that year was, she said, we can't allow this to happen. We have to stick together. We have to vote against en masse whatever the Republicans are trying to do. And there are some lessons there. Overall, to Tammy's point, I think what House Republicans need to do over these next few years is be, in the eyes of average normal voters, responsive and more functional than what we've seen so far. But, you know, they got there. It's not the end of the world. It wasn't a crisis. Now let's see what they can do.
The Democrats delivered. The Republicans need to deliver as well.
At the end of the day.
What?
So to this guy, it's a bad thing what Republicans just did.
God.
And he contrasted that with Democrats, where he says under Nancy Pelosi, they all fell in line. So he says this wouldn't have happened under Nancy Pelosi.
Aaron, I didn't understand that. I thought he was, this is crazy. They say the same thing that we'd be saying on the show, but they just say it like it's a, like.
It's a, using, basically standing up.
It was good.
Yeah, no. He thinks it's bad. He thinks it's bad. And he's pointing out that those obedient progressive Democrats never would have done such a thing under Nancy Pelosi.
The ones that you said were steering the party. Remember that was what AOC.
That's right.
Commandeered the entire party.
That's right. So here's Brianna Joy Gray, who's been at the forefront of Force the Vote. She says, can't get over how embarrassing this is for progressives. Total humiliation.
Yeah, so you got, she's like, just honest, you got to accept it when you see it. I'm sure they saw this coming, how bad this looks.
They tried their best, I think, to paper over it, but this is...
I think Fox, it shows how much Fox is uniparty kind of stuff, because for them to not be jumping on the populism of it.
Most of them are with the establishment. They don't like any kind of discord, and they have a common interest in painting the different fringe factions of the party as being, too extreme. But the difference is that one extreme on the right this time actually stood for something. The left so-called extreme, the squad, didn't. So here is Revolutionary Blackout Network, Socialist MMA. Nick Cruz, friend of the show, he says he looks at the headline, which is McCarthy resorts to new concessions to hardliners to win Speaker post. And Nick Cruz says the progressives who were against force the vote should never be taken seriously ever again.
Look at that. Kevin McCarthy would give in to more demands from far right. Do you see what it called them? Far right rebels.
The hardliners. Yes. Yeah, the far right rebels.
Like the reckless Antifas tearing through.
They should teach Antifa some lessons, maybe.
Yeah.
And here is the podcast Do Dissidents, and they're putting out some of the concessions. Now, the full list is not available yet as we're broadcasting, but some of the details have emerged, and the concessions include floor votes on border and term limits. Single member can call vote to remove the speaker. So if anybody doesn't like Kevin McCarthy's performance as speaker, they can call a vote to remove him.
Why was that not already just a rule?
It was a rule before, but guess who killed it?
Oh,
Nancy Pelosi.
What?
So they're just restoring to the status quo from before Nancy Pelosi took over. With
sometimes I pass a new law to break the old law.
Rules Committee appointees, so members of the Freedom Caucus, the rebellious caucus, will get on the Rules Committee. Select Committee on DOJ abuse, so they're going to investigate intelligence agencies, form a new church committee, which we're going to be talking about shortly, reveal government officials' salaries. And of course, and again, this has to be stressed, we're not endorsing all of these Freedom Caucus demands. Obviously, some of them are for policies that many progressives would find abhorrent. They want to cut social spending. They want to increase border enforcement. But there are some demands that I think are worthy of support, especially the church committee. This new church committee.
Is that one that leaked or something?
Well, it's one of the details that have come out. And also, they've apparently won a cut in military spending. And we're going to talk more about that.
I saw someone complaining about that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about it. But the point is, whatever demands they won, the point is they got something. They won. They held out. They didn't give their vote to McCarthy. They asked for something in return. They demanded something in return, and they won it, which is what progressives were being asked to do during Force the Vote. So here is the podcast Do Dissidents playing a clip of a host of a show called The Middle-Aged McCarthyites. She's one of the hosts of that show. And here they are commenting on it.
The concessions that McCarthy has agreed to don't even matter for the group of Republicans who refuse to vote for him, okay? They don't care about the concessions. They don't trust him, and they've said so. They don't trust him. They're not going to vote for him. It's not about concessions.
Okay, so now we know for a fact that is complete horseshit. It was about concessions. Now, you could say she didn't have the foresight to know that he was going to win. You didn't need the foresight to know that he was going to win in order to know that, yes, it was about concessions. After the first day of voting, after McCarthy lost 3 times, and then they said, okay, let's take a break and come back because it's too embarrassing. We can't have him lose 8, 9, 10 times on the first day, right? After they took a break on the first day, Lauren Boebert went on Fox News, and she told this to Bret Baier. She said, just last night, 2 colleagues and myself walked into Kevin McCarthy's office and presented him a very common sense proposal, a deal that got him 218 votes, the gavel on the first ballot. And he smugly rejected that. So what was the deal? She says it was very common sense things like putting forward a border security bill, putting forward a term limits bill, having a measure in place where any member of Congress who offers an amendment to reduce the federal debt, well, that's made an order. And there were so many other things that were common sense and even requests that he had made of us that we presented to him. And right now it is seemingly very difficult. It is seeming very difficult for Kevin McCarthy to come back around and pick up those votes that I had in hand for him last night. So Lauren Boebert tells Fox News, no, I met with him the night before with a list of demands.
And they got to those demands. Here's some of them. This is a partial list. It will take a single congressperson acting in what is known as a Jeffersonian motion to move to remove the speaker, a church-style committee to be convened to look into the weaponization of the FBI and other intelligence organizations of the U.S. government. Term limits will be put up for a vote. Bills presented to Congress will be a single subject, not omnibus with all the attendant earmarks. So basically not these massive bills that nobody has the time to read. The Texas border plan will be put before Congress. COVID mandates will be ended, as will all funding for them. And budget bills would stop the endless increases in the debt ceiling. And the debt, there's a part there I don't agree with, where basically they want to pair any increase to the debt ceiling with a cut in spending. And to the extent they want to cut social spending, that's something I personally oppose, and most progressives would. But the point is, they're asking for something here. And this is from the Washington Post. McCarthy has reportedly agreed to a vote on a 10-year budget that would cap spending at fiscal year 2020 levels. That would effectively reduce defense spending by about 10% unless the Pentagon is exempted. So we'll see what happens there. But imagine if that goes through. And maybe it won't, because this is the Republican Party after all. But imagine if that goes through, and anywhere near some kind of cut like that would be a huge achievement, to the point where, guess who says she's excited about these concessions that some YouTube pundits want to try to play down and claim don't even exist? Well, this is Ilhan Omar, member of the Squad, and this is what she said about some of these reported concessions that the Freedom Caucus won.
The obviously cuts to the Pentagon budget is pretty exciting for folks like me who are putting up amendments to do so. I also think the church-style committee that they are thinking about to look into if there has been any violations of First Amendment rights of Americans by the FBI and others also interests me. So we'll see what ends up happening, and if the Republicans are able to actually be able to get anything done.
So that's Ilhan Omar. And she goes on to say that she's skeptical that they will get anything done. But the point is here on the demand itself, on the idea that these rebellious Republicans put forward, even Ilhan Omar of the Squad has to admit that she's pretty excited about a few of those demands. She mentions the cut in military spending and a new church committee to investigate intelligence abuses. And to her, in her words, that's pretty exciting. And imagine if she could have been excited enough about using her own leverage to achieve those very same demands a few years ago during Force the Vote, along with any other progressive items that she cares about, when she could have leveraged her vote along with that of other progressives rather than giving it for nothing to Nancy Pelosi. And her comment here comes a couple of days after she said this about the deal between McCarthy and the Freedom Caucus. She said, McCarthy just agreed to a deal with far-right insurrectionists that would hold the entire U.S. and global economy hostage to extreme cuts to everything from housing to education, healthcare, Social Security, and Medicare. Hard to overstate how dangerous this is. So obviously, there's a lot of this about this deal that she is critical of and is scared of. But on some of those demands, she has to admit that she finds them exciting. And here's another progressive voice that was pretty much against Force the Vote back when Jimmy Dore and others were advocating it, but now has to acknowledge the obvious, that it was a good strategy. So here's Jacobin magazine. It says this: by fighting Kevin McCarthy's bid to be the next Speaker of the House, the right wing of the Republican Party won significant concessions that will make it a powerful player in Congress. The left should learn to replicate its tactics for egalitarian ends.
Same author?
That's Jacobin, from which a few years ago was putting down Force the Vote and saying that Jimmy Dore was wrong.
When Jacobin was doing it, was that just like the editors, or was there like a specific
writer?
It
was one writer. Yes, it was a writer. But the point is, that was the line that I think Jacobin took. I think that's fair to say, because that's the voice that they featured. And so when it says the left should learn to replicate its tactics for egalitarian ends, yes, that is a good lesson. Another takeaway is just listen to Jimmy Dore next time.
I mean, dude, I wouldn't even do that, except I can't believe when I watch the clips and stuff. I'm not even like, oh, he's been right on all of these.
Yes, he has. Yes, he has. And so look, here's what Jacobin says. If we on the left really want to build a popular alternative to the Republican and Democratic parties and the Freedom Caucus, we need to create as much daylight between us and them as possible. Using high-profile leadership fights to draw out the lines of division between us and Democratic leaders is one very appealing tactic for doing so. Do you want to know when there could have been a high-profile leadership fight? That was 2 years ago during Force the Vote, when Nancy Pelosi, like Kevin McCarthy, needed the votes of all of her members, including the Squad. And the Squad declined to take up the idea that was urged of them by this show and other progressive voices to force the vote, to use their leverage to have a vote on Medicare for all or something concrete, just something.
And why? Because the threat of Kevin McCarthy could become the speaker.
That's right, because Kevin McCarthy.
I can't stop bringing it up.
That was the excuse they gave, is that if we don't give our vote to Nancy Pelosi, then Kevin McCarthy could become speaker. Which, of course, turned out to be false, because when it was Kevin McCarthy's turn to become speaker, he couldn't even become speaker without giving into his own party, with some demands of members of his own party. And so Jacobin goes on, if we on the left really want to build a popular alternative to the Republican and Democratic parties and the free... Oh, I've already read that. So Jacobin goes on, the right showed the way here. Not in the demands it made. Most of those are specific to its own agenda of taking an axe to the federal government, but in how it made them. To achieve very different ends, we should be prepared to go to war against Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and others who otherwise have no sympathy for our interest in advancing our agenda. Yes, just as Force the Vote advocates were saying 2 years ago, which, by the way, this article does not acknowledge. So nowhere in here do they say, we could have had this 2 years ago, but we didn't.
Did they say anything about Jimmy by name when they were against it?
Yes, they did. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it. And we need to win powerful bully pulpits from which to propagandize for democratic socialist politics. To date, centrist Democrats have worked hard to keep the left off of important committees. For example, Democratic leaders denied key committee assignments to progressive left Congress members like AOC and Rashida Tlaib in 2019 and again going into 2021. By playing hardball, we could change that. And again, when AOC was arguing against activists who were advocating for us to vote, one of the arguments that she made was that if we use our leverage for other things, for example, getting committee assignments, then that could lead to concrete action and we could gain from that. Well, they didn't get the committee assignments. They got nothing. All what happened was Nancy Pelosi took their votes, said thank you very much, posed with them on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, and sent them on their way. The left cannot sit back and let the far right limit the political battlefield to these three camps. We are not on the same side as the leaders of our nominal party, and we have every reason to fight them just as hard as the right does against their leadership. We ought to sit very uncomfortably inside the Democratic fold. It is at best a temporary and fraught marriage of necessity, one that we should want to exit as soon as possible. Imagine in 2024 that Democrats retake the House. For weeks leading up to the election to make Hakeem Jeffries the next Speaker of the House, the left goes on the offensive, appearing on major talk shows, blanketing social media, and organizing rallies in critical districts to oppose Jeffries' ascent to leadership, which is what Jimmy and other Force the Vote advocates were trying to do 2 years ago. But they got mocked and derided and insulted. So it's great to see some awareness now that this tactic works from a Democratic Socialist magazine that was not advocating this back when progressives had the chance to actually do it for themselves back 2 years ago.
Well, yeah, now that it's too late, it's okay to say it.
There we go. Yeah. Not only have right-wing Republicans shown that such a fight could strengthen a minority's hand in Congress, but such a fight would have the added value of drawing out the contrast between the Democratic leadership's conservative agenda and the left's much more popular program. And for people who followed Force the Vote, that was one of the arguments that, yes, for example, Jimmy's proposal was a floor vote on Medicare for all, because that was among progressives and most of the country a really popular proposal. And even if it would have been voted down, which was very likely, even though it was a pandemic, still the spectacle of corporate Democrats joining with Republicans voting against giving everyone health care would have been a galvanizing moment. And it would have been a chance to contrast the left's much more popular program. That was the chance we had.
What magazine is this? No Shit Magazine?
No Shit Magazine 2 years later. In the last few weeks, the American right showed us just how much room there is in Congress to propagandize for one's politics and build power. Take notes. Our time will come, and we should be as prepared to fight as they were. And what I find sad here is that a Democratic Socialist magazine that does a lot of work that I like, I've learned a lot from Jacobin. I don't agree with everything, obviously, but it does good work on some issues I really care about, especially the Ukraine proxy war. It has some great writers on that. But they're more willing here to give credit to the American right than they are to people on their own side. Progressives like Jimmy, Brianna Joy Gray, Katie Halper, others who were front and center with Force the Vote. And there are many other people, I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember everyone's names. Because people don't like to admit that they're wrong, and they don't and they also, when there are people on the left who have been deemed off limits by the establishment, I think there's a motivation by some people they can gain respectability by not giving props to people who've been deemed off limits.
It's a weird, like, half-ass, like he's not their sort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not us. Like, he's not the left. Yeah. So they'd rather give credit to the right than the people on their left who are right about this first. Here's Brianna Joy Gray on this. This is much better than the "Don't Force the Vote" piece from 2 years ago. But it's odd to write a whole article like this and not once mention that there was a campaign to have the squad fight for this 2 years ago that the magazine never reported favorably
on. Ben Burgess who wrote that? Don't force the vote?
Yes.
What does he say now? Is he like...
I don't know. Yeah. I imagine he's got a mealy-mouth excuse for why it's still not a good idea. But I don't know. I don't want to... I mean, maybe I'm not giving enough credit.
Maybe he has a full-mouthed excuse.
I don't know. Who knows? Hopefully he'll prove me wrong. This is the article from 2 years ago in Jacobin. Jimmy Dore is right about the urgency of Medicare for all, but AOC, one of its strongest supporters in Congress, isn't the problem. The problem is a political landscape in which Nancy Pelosi could become Speaker in the first place.
That's an interesting mealy-mouthed way out.
Yeah. That's kind of like, if you, let's say you oppose private healthcare, right? That's like saying, the problem isn't private healthcare. It's the world in which privatized healthcare exists. So we have to basically oppose this entire planet.
By the way, if one of its strongest supporters for Medicare for all is AOC, isn't that the problem?
Yes,
she's
she won't
the
fight
strong
for it.
support.
Yeah, yeah. But it's like, so, and the argument there was, so that was an article against force the vote. That was the article, and that was I think they're on the coverage that they gave to it. Never favorable. And again, here's another voice, Kshama Sawant, socialist lawmaker in Seattle, member of the city council. It's deeply unfortunate. It was the right wing who've shown how to fight for something in Congress. The squad, also the Progressive Caucus, headed by Jayapal, have utterly failed, refused to use their leverage to stand up to the Democratic establishment and win any gains for working people. Here is Jay Bayafont on Twitter. Civility, he's with Revolutionary Blackout Network. Civility politics is the tool of the oppressor. From what we see, it's the opinion of some that withholding your vote for some concessions in order to make gains for the workers and poor is uncivil and won't work, even though it actually worked. Force the vote works.
There's nothing more uncivil than civil action.
Blue Check Beth, Jimmy Dore still trending because of anti-Medicare for all, anti-force the vote neoliberals are big mad at being so thoroughly embarrassed by the GOP's force the vote success. They're getting multiple concessions, just like the squad could have done, but chose not to do. So even though people are refusing to give credit where it's due to all those who advocated force the vote, starting with this show, the word's still getting out there. And it's a deeply embarrassing moment for people who tried to shut down force the vote 2 years ago. And it's not going to get any better by pretending that didn't happen. I can say that.
Yeah, the squad reminds me of, like, without saying any names, like a bunch of comedians who gave up on being funny to be into, getting the full Hollywood. Like, it really is the same kind of craven. Like, I'm going to the Met Gala. I can't ruin it now.
Everybody, we're doing live stand-up comedy in Los Angeles in January and February in Los Angeles. And then we're going to Tempe, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Nashville. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets and become a premium member while you're there.